Good afternoon. Welcome back to Football League World TV. It's Tuesday afternoon and it's time for another debate show. This afternoon we're talking about Cardiff City and Mick McCarthy and whether it's time for the Bluebirds to let him go. Of course, they've got Swansea City this weekend in the South Wales derby. I'm your host, George Dagless, and joining me this afternoon are Toby Wilding and Marcus Ali. Toby, how are you getting on?
Yeah, good, thanks. Looking forward to this one. Should be interesting issues to discuss here.
Yep, certainly a lot going on to dissect with the Bluebirds. Marcus, how are you?
Yeah, living the dream. Apologies if the voice isn't in the best shape in this episode. I think I'm feeling the under the weather, cold symptoms that everyone is at the moment. But yeah, looking forward to talking about the Football League with the pair of you.
Yeah, certainly a few colds going around at the moment. We will battle through. Cardiff fans, if you're watching, wherever you are watching, do get in touch. Let us know your thoughts. What's going on with your club at the moment? What's going on with Mick McCarthy? Are you Mick in? Are you Mick out? It does seem that quite a few are Mick out at the moment. But we'll get to that later on in the show. Let's start by looking at Cardiff's form in recent weeks. It's been 5 straight losses for Cardiff in the Championship. That's not good form, no matter who you are. You look at some of the defeats as well. 4-0 loss at home to West Brom, a 5-1 defeat away at Blackburn, defeats to the likes of Bournemouth, Coventry, and several other top sides near the top of the table. Toby, let's come to you first of all. You were at the game against Blackburn. In fact, obviously you're a Blackburn fan, and before we came on, you said that Cardiff were pretty shocking that day. I think it's fair to say in the last few weeks that they've just been well below par, haven't they?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like I say, as I said, I was pretty stunned by what I saw or didn't see from Cardiff at Ewood Park that day. Defensively, they were all over the place. I mean, that third goal they conceded in particular was just an absolute gift. It was absolutely nothing like what you might expect from a Mick McCarthy side in terms of the solidity you would usually expect from one of them. But I think from an attacking perspective as well, they were absolutely nowhere for the most part. I mean, you look at Kiefer Moore, he 20 goals last season, but that day in particular, he offered very little. It was only really the introduction of Ryan Giles at half-time that sort of sparked a bit of something for Cardiff, but by then it was really too late with Blackburn leading 3-0 at the break and getting a fourth early in the second half. So there seems to be problems all over the pitch. I mean, like I say, it was 5-1 that game, and that one, which was a Sean Morrison header from a corner, is the only goal that Cardiff have scored in that run of 5 defeats. So that's a huge concern at both ends of the pitch for them, really.
Looking at that game in particular, Toby, obviously, Cardiff fell behind, pretty sharpish, really. Did you see any sort of sign of fight from them at all? I mean, is it fair to say that they just sort of rolled over? Was it fair to say maybe that they didn't look like they were playing under the manager? Obviously, that result's come in the middle of this sort of 5-game losing streak.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't say that I saw a great deal of fight from them in particular. I mean, like I say, defensively, it was so unlike them, particularly that first goal they conceded, the ball over the top. It was such a simple one to concede. Again, the third one was a complete mess. The fourth one, it's a nice move from Rovers, but they're just the passage of play. There was just no pressure at all on Blackburn going forward. So no, and as well the fact that they've not sort of responded to that. Obviously, West Brom are going to be a challenge for any team, but I think the way they went down there 4-0 and then Reading as well in the last game before the international break, there's not been the sort of response you might expect to see, particularly from a manager that with the sort of passion and the fight that McCarthy has. It's just not come since that game either.
Marcus, what have you made of it just in general so far at Cardiff? I mean, we've made a lot about this 5-game losing streak. They've lost other games as well, so far this season. And as Toby says, they just don't really look like a McCarthy team, and they look a complete shadow of the one that went on that brilliant run of form when he first arrived at the club.
Yeah, I think it's the manner of the defeats that is definitely the concerning point. Toby rightly brings up that the one goal is coming from a centre-back in Sean Morrison. That is very concerning considering, teams can go on bad runs throughout the season, but you want to see some signs that they are going to turn the corner. I think they were there in their 1-0 defeat to Reading, just going into the international break. If you look at the shot count in that game, Cardiff did have the better of it and were unfortunate to lose a game when 1-0. Just off the top of my head, I think I recall correctly that Reading only had 2 shots in that game. One of them goes in. Cardiff sort of frustrated that they can't get on the score sheet. So I think there was definitely something to come from that, and that performance might have given the board a little bit of more patience with McCarthy. And even though it is a tough run that's coming up of fixtures after the international break, a little bit more belief that he can turn it around. You mentioned, of course, the excellent form that they showed after he was appointed in the role last season. I've just noted down some of the numbers of how they did. As soon as he got the job in January, obviously it was only on a deal until the end of the season. There was a period between late January and the start of March where they won 6 games and won 3, unbeaten in 9. That's an incredible start to McCarthy's time in the role. Then they gave him a contract until the end of next season, the summer of 2023. And in the 12 games that followed, they won 3, drew 6 and drew 3. Still quite solid mid-table, but you can see that there was a drop-off in form that's obviously continued this season compared to that lightning start and new manager bounce that they had. So I think in terms of that, maybe we shouldn't be as surprised to see them drop off, but it has been alarming, particularly, as you mentioned, that those results against Blackburn and West Bromwich Albion.
I suppose one area maybe of solace, if you can pick it out in a 5-game losing streak, Toby, is you look at the teams that Cardiff have lost to, and a lot of them are right near the top end of the table, the likes of Bournemouth, West Brom, Coventry. Obviously, Blackburn have had a pretty decent start. Yes, they've lost the last couple of games, but they're still sitting in 8th. Lost to Reading as well, who are, have been showing good form lately. I guess the only sort of thing you can say is that Cardiff had some really tough games looking at the league table, and all they can do really is try and put that away to do so this weekend.
Yeah, that's a massive opportunity, and like I said, they do have to take it. And you are right. That is 5 very good teams they've lost to. But I think the problem they've got now, obviously, looking at the fixtures coming up, they've got Swansea, so form always seems to go out the window in a derby. Literally anything can happen in a game like that. Then it's Fulham, who are pushing for promotion. Middlesbrough, you never quite know what you're going to get with them. Stoke are another team who started the season on fire. QPR to come after that as well. They're up there in the playoff mix. So they've got some solace in the fact that they could turn it around when perhaps the fixture list eases up a bit. But looking at those next 5 games, I'm not sure it does. And if they continue to struggle through that, then they're going to sort of slip down the table. And by the time perhaps it does get to a more favourable run of fixtures, they're playing catch up massively. And the pressure that there'll be coming on McCarthy from the crowd will be even greater if he is still there from that time. And obviously that's not going to help the players on the pitch either. So, I mean, there is something to take from the fact that maybe they've been up against some of the top teams. And as you say, there were some narrow defeats in there. Reading, they perhaps should have got something from. But they've got another tough run coming up that's going to could make things even harder for them here.
Certainly could do. Marcus, you look at the squad that Cardiff have got, and there's some decent players in there. Yes, the likes of Harry Wilson hasn't returned, but there's still a lot of quality in that team. Where do you think Mick McCarthy's struggling to get a tune out of it at the moment? And looking at that squad on paper, where realistically do you think it should be sort of this point of the season, and where should it be looking as well for the remainder of this year?
I think it's a mid-table squad. To be honest, I don't think any Cardiff fans can be under any illusions that is a top 6 squad. There's a huge hole when you look at the creative contingent on who's going to supply chances for a striker of the quality that he's shown in recent years of Kiefer Moore. Last season, you mentioned Harry Wilson, Shea Ojo. They also had on loan, was quite a consistent performer for them. And also Josh Murphy, who's on loan at Preston North End. Now, Cardiff spent over £10 million to bring in Josh Murphy when they're in the Premier League from Norwich. He's now in the last year of his contract at the Cardiff City Stadium, and he's spending it on loan at Preston North End. He got 2 goals and 6 assists for them last season. It doesn't really make sense to me, the way they've gotten rid of all these creative players and they're pinning their hopes on Ryan Giles. We can talk about the excellent defensive contingent they had, particularly last season, how good Kiefer Moore is, but someone has to be creating the chances, and they're pinning way too much of their hopes on Ryan Giles. This is a guy who was playing left wing back last season on loan at Rotherham and Coventry, managed 2 goals and 1 assist, and he's now meant to be your sole number 1 creator. I don't see how that sort of adds up to create a promotion push, which it feels like people were expecting from Cardiff at the beginning of the season. In terms of the squad strength, I say it's around mid-table, so they're underperforming at the moment. But hopefully, I think they can turn it around. As Toby mentioned, that tough run of fixtures, they've got 3 of the current top 6 in the next 5 after the international break, and that's not even including Swansea, which is, of course, a big derby. So it is crunch time for Mick McCarthy.
Certainly is. Toby, what do you make of the squad? Are you someone that shares similar thoughts to Marcus there?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, obviously, as Marcus is saying, those two, Shea Ojo, get my words out, and Harry Wilson are two big losses. But it's a surprise. I mean, it was a strange transfer window, like Marcus was saying. Josh Murphy, he went out right at the last minute on deadline day, so they didn't really give themselves any chance to replace him. I mean, Ryan Wintle came in on loan and then I think went straight out. Came in on a permanent and then went straight out on loan to Blackpool. So there was some strange business there that perhaps hasn't helped McCarthy as such, but still, you look at the quality of players they've got with Keith Moore up front. They've got, like we were saying, sort of Morrison, Aidan Flint. They've got Curtis Nelson, maybe. There's the foundations there of a solid defence. So, yes, it's perhaps been a bit of a strange setup in terms of what they put together over the transfer window, but they should still be doing a lot more than what they are doing, in my opinion.
Obviously, we're coming out of the international break now. And as we mentioned, the Swansea game's coming up this weekend. We'll get to that in a second. But, you often see around international breaks a manager lose their job and it gives the club time to bring in their new man if obviously they've got someone lined up. Marcus, were you a little bit surprised, first of all, that Cardiff haven't let McCarthy go in the last couple of weeks?
I wasn't, to be honest. I think they showed a lot of faith in him by giving him what would have been about a 2.5-year contract last season. I don't think they would have wanted to go back on that so quickly. As I mentioned, I think that Reading performance maybe might have saved him a little bit because there were positives to take. But going into the international break, I think Cardiff are still looking for stability more than anything. It's their last year of parachute payments this season. I think, obviously, I mentioned Josh Murphy. Maybe they wanted Preston to pay some of his wages this season because obviously he'll be on a Premier League contract. That could be factored into the decision. So I think in Mick McCarthy, they see a manager who can keep them in the Championship, hopefully not have them feeling any relegation anxieties until the end of his contract next summer. I think that will still be the plan. There's been a lot of change at Cardiff since they fell out of the Premier League. And even though it was the international break and you come into it 5 losses, I think they will be patient and wait a little bit longer, and there will have to be serious doubts about whether they can maintain their Championship status before they pull the trigger.
Okay, what do you reckon, Toby? Do you think Cardiff perhaps should have let McCarthy go in the international break? It's still going, obviously, it's coming to an end now, but or do you think that maybe it's right that they've kept on with him just for a little bit longer?
I mean, to be honest, I was slightly surprised that they didn't pull the trigger sort of right at the start of the wind of the break. I mean, even though that was an improved performance against Reading, I mean, ultimately this is a results business, and the result wasn't there for Cardiff. And I think even with, as we say, that improved showing on the pitch against Reading, you still sort of saw the frustration from the fans, and I think that pressure, even in that defeat to Reading, it was still there, and I think it probably is going to remain until something changes. So I was perhaps slightly surprised, especially given the international break would have given them a bit more time to maybe get a manager in and sort of bed in, adapt, get the squad working towards his style, whoever it might have been, and give them a bit of time to prepare for the Cardiff Swans again. But now we've got to this point, I don't think that now there is enough time for them to do it and get themselves ready with a new man in charge for the Swansea game. And I think almost if they were to change now, and it would look a bit sort of desperate, a bit panicky, and that just gives Swansea a huge amount of motivation going into Sunday. So I think now they do have to stick with him at least for that game, and we'll see how that goes. I mean, defeat there, God, goodness knows what might happen if that goes down.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that Swansea game now, Toby. 12 o'clock Sunday afternoon. Probably makes sense that it's an earlier kickoff than a later one, given what can happen around the derby and certain drinking habits. But if Cardiff lose this one, they're obviously they're in big trouble anyway. But losing a game like this, with the repercussions it could have for McCarthy, is this the sort of last chance saloon you think for the Cardiff manager?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, obviously, we've been talking about Cardiff a lot here in their position in the table, but Swansea are only one place ahead of them in 19th, and that's only on goal difference. So again, you go back to we've been talking about these defeats in the last 5 games have come to clubs at the higher end of the table. This one, if it is a defeat, yes, there's an element of who knows what can happen in the derby, but regardless of that, it would still be a big opportunity missed for Cardiff to pick up some points against another side who perhaps aren't in the best of form at the minute. So that's going to heap pressure on McCarthy, and then that's on top of the obvious inevitable pressure and frustration there'll be from the fan base if Cardiff do lose to their local rivals.
What do you reckon, Marcus? Obviously, Swansea, big game this weekend for Cardiff. Is it, game over for Mick if they do lose this weekend?
It's hard to call. Obviously, I've just said how I think that the board are looking for a sustainable approach, and with there not an obvious name to come in for Mick McCarthy, I can see them being a little bit more patient. They could lose against Swansea and not fall into the relegation zone. For me, I don't think a sacking will happen unless Cardiff are in the bottom three. Sometimes it's pointless to delay the inevitable. You just end up in a worse position further down the line. But I do think with how poor the likes of Barnsley, Hull, Peterborough, and sadly with the points deduction, Derby are looking, maybe Cardiff and Swansea don't have as much to worry about as their league position suggests. I don't think they'll be looking over their shoulders as worryingly as the standings suggest they maybe should. So I think he could still survive a loss, to be honest. But it would depend on how the teams around him do. He'd be very fortunate to survive a loss, but I do think that is my stance on this. I think while they're outside the bottom three, he'll stay in a job.
Okay, yeah, you can imagine certainly get a fair deal of grief on social media. Not that he has it, of course, but there'll be a fair few comments under the Cardiff Twitter account, I think, if they did lose to Swansea this weekend. Marcus, let's just talk theoretically for a minute. If McCarthy does leave in the near future, you've obviously sort of suggested there that there's perhaps not a standout candidate to replace him. Where could you see Cardiff potentially going then? Do they look for a completely different kind of manager, a new face that hasn't really had their chance this level? You look at the likes of what Swansea done with Russell Martin. He's gone in there. Obviously, he had League One experience for MK Dons, but he's managing in the Championship now. Do they go down that route, or do they look again for another experienced head of similar ilk to McCarthy and just hope that it'll be a little bit different this time?
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Obviously, it's quite good maybe to look down the past managers in trying to predict who they're going to bring in. You've got the likes of Neil Warnock and Neil Harris in there, who are two managers in combination with Mick McCarthy, who it's more substance over style. I don't think Cardiff particularly care about having an aesthetically nice brand of football, so maybe that takes away the Russell Martin style approach. Obviously, Ryan Lowe's flying with Plymouth in League One. I expect the next Championship vacancy, him to be linked with it. You got Mike Flynn, bit of a wild card suggestion, just left Newport, is a Welshman. Maybe he could get a crack at a high level, but I'm really not sure. The job that Neil Harris did looks miles better now than it did when he was sacked last season, having them in mid-table and getting them in the playoffs in 2019-20. Maybe they could go back grovelling to him. Honestly, I've got no idea. Flynn and Harris are the only sort of half realistic suggestions. Obviously, Mick McCarthy takes Terry Connor with him wherever he goes, so it's not like there'd be an assistant or some kind of internal appointment. I'm not sure who their under-23s manager is, but I don't think they'd be quick to spend a lot of money on a flashy replacement. I think it would be more stability. That they know the financial minefield they're in during COVID times and with their parachute payments running out. So yeah, sorry to answer your question with I haven't got a clue, but there's definitely a few names that will get bandied about.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough, Marcus. At least you're honest. Toby, is there any name particularly you could see stand out, or you similar to Marcus, where there's not a massive amount of names really standing out to you at the moment?
Yeah, it's a tough one. I mean, I think this is the age-old problem for any club when they're considering moving on for a manager: is who can they get in to replace him? I mean, I think inevitably, if McCarthy was to go, then you probably see the names as they are with any job at the minute bandied about of, say, Wilder and Howe. But whether the Cardiff would be able to tempt them when they've just been sort of coming at, well, the last jobs were Premier League jobs, it might be a challenge. I mean, Ryan Lowe was another one who I thought as a possible candidate. And another one who I quite like, who could be worth considering if Cardiff were going to go down the League One route, is Jimmy Floyd Hasselbank at Burton. I mean, he did brilliantly last season to get them out of trouble. I mean, for all intents and purposes, they looked like they were relegated to League Two when he took over, and he turned them around brilliantly, got them to safety, and then sort of he's kicked on from that bit this season. They're up in 10th now in the League One table. So he knows how to steady a ship. He knows how to turn things around. He has got a little bit of championship experience from the past. So he's one who I think if they were to look somewhere else, he's one who would be my sort of shout as being worth considering.
Certainly a decent shout that one could be. As for Mick McCarthy, Toby, if he does leave, what next for him? Does he, take a holiday? Does he go and manage a football club in Cyprus or somewhere like that again, or does he just walk away, get back on behind the mic for Sky again?
I mean, I don't think. Well, I'll be honest. I don't think I'd complain too much if he was back behind the mic for Sky. It was certainly some entertainment there when he was doing that. And yeah, I don't think he's one who he's not under pressure really to rush into a job. I wouldn't have thought with the amount of time he's been in the game, he's probably accumulated enough that he could sort of take a step back now if he wanted to. And that's not to say that he wouldn't come back if he felt the job was right. But I think especially after all the pressure that he's been under at Cardiff recently, he might not be too opposed to having a little bit of time away from that side of the game to begin with, at first at least.
Yeah, I mean, obviously he's not done yet. We shouldn't write him off just yet. He's still in the job. But Marcus, if Mick does end up getting removed from that Cardiff City job in the near future, what do you see the sort of future holding for him? Are you similar to Toby, like to see him back on Sky with the EFL coverage, or maybe he goes and does something completely different?
Yeah, I completely agree with Toby. I can't see him rushing into a job. I think this could potentially be his last job. He's 62 now, and I think football is moving away, particularly in the top two tiers of English football, from the sort of style that Mick McCarthy is looking to implement. Whether he would look for a job in the third tier, I have no idea. That move to Apoel Nicosia a few years ago did surprise me, but maybe that would be a more likely route back into management than back in the Football League. Certainly, I can't see him getting another championship job if he is to leave the Bluebirds quite soon.
Okay, right. Just before we wrap up then, as hard as it is to give such a prediction, I'm sure there'll be a few caveats to this one as well. So let's go to you, Toby, first of all. Mick McCarthy, is it time for Cardiff to sack him? Yes or no?
My gut feeling is, like I say, at the start of the international break, I would have said yes. I think with the mood in the fan base and the run of results, I was quite surprised. I think now they've got to hang on, especially with it being a derby on Sunday. Perhaps if it wasn't that, then maybe they could go now. But I think they've got to have some stability for that. So that could end up being a stay of execution for him if they get a win on Sunday. But if they don't, then yes, for me, it would be time to sort of move on, keep the fans happy, and look for someone else who can maybe give them the sort of kick they got from McCarthy when he took over last season.
Okay, we'll see. Marcus, what's your verdict?
I think he's going to be all right. I don't think Cardiff will drop into the bottom three. I think Mick can keep them flirting above that, maybe get to January and get a few players in, which is much, much needed, and push towards mid-table. I'm not expecting any sparkles, but I'm expecting Mick McCarthy, if he's there to the end of the season, to keep Cardiff in the Championship. And that, for me, would keep him in a job.
Okay, we shall see what happens. That brings to an end the debate here on Football League World TV for this afternoon. We've been talking about Mick McCarthy and his future at Cardiff City. Marcus, Toby, thank you very much for joining me this afternoon on the debate. Hopefully you've enjoyed it. I've certainly enjoyed listening to your views on Mick McCarthy and all things Cardiff. Cardiff fans watching, hopefully you've enjoyed it too. If you can subscribe to our YouTube channel, it's Football League World TV. That would be greatly appreciated. That's it for this afternoon on the debate. We hope you've enjoyed what we've had to say, and we'll speak to you very, very soon.